The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
You've probably seen the news by now. Ryan Reaves suspended 5 games for a very dangerous hit on Edmonton Oilers defenseman Darnell Nurse. I did think it was a little fast that they got to that resolution, but I think when you look at the hit, pretty obvious that it was a suspendable offense. Siege. What's your thinking on, what's your insights on how that all went down?
Well, I mean, look, the usual factors play into it here. This is the 4th time Ryan Reaves has been suspended during his NHL career. In this case, Darnell Nurse suffered a concussion, which if you saw the hit isn't a surprise to hear and to learn. And, you know, it's a dangerous play in which the Department of Player Safety, you know, in breaking down that tape, felt that there was a route to finish the hit there. And, you know, Nurse is obviously eligible to be checked. He had the puck on his stick coming around the net. That would involve, you know, more contact through the core of the body versus the head. And so you add those factors together and you get a pretty stiff punishment. You know, I wouldn't have guessed 5. I know you like to do this game with me, but when we haven't had the ruling yet about how many games it's going to be. If you know, I was at the game on Saturday night. If you had asked me leaving the rink, I probably would have said 3 games, maybe 4 at the high end. You know, but the Department of Player Safety went with 5, and you know, I'm sure there's people in the Leafs front office who might feel that that's a little stiff of a punishment. But you know, in speaking to the fact that the ruling came down within about 24 hours of the play, even though this isn't a case where the Leafs, you know, are playing until Wednesday, so that there was time to take. I think it does say there wasn't much debate about whether it was just suspendable. You know, it comes down to a debate about the number of games.
Is that suspension, you think, going to stand? Do you think? Do you get any insight that maybe Reaves might want to appeal? Maybe the length of games. You think he'll take the punishment?
I'm sure he wants to appeal. Most players want to appeal. Yeah. You know, the way the system works is when it's a 5 games or less, your appeal goes to Commissioner Gary Bettman. If you look historically, I mean, Bettman has reduced some suspensions, but it doesn't happen too often. You know, there's kind of a broad feeling among players, among agents, among, you know, those on the player side of the table, that there's not much point in appealing when you're just appealing to essentially George Parros' boss. You know, that it's unlikely that you're going to get it reduced. So, you know, can't say definitively that he won't, but I you know, my sense is that there's a feeling that it might not be worth it. And, you know, it just might be one of these ones where, you know, he has to take his medicine. I mean, I don't know if you saw the clip that it appeared, and we haven't had a chance to speak with Ryan Reaves since this, but it did appear as he was leaving the ice, he was sort of touching at his heart as though he was like saying, "My bad," or "I'm sorry," or something along those lines. I mean, I'm sure he feels awful about it. You know, part of that hit too, which is just, it's not even the hit, it's the aftermath. But, you know, Darnell Nurse cut his forehead, or had a cut on his face from his visor.
Really bad.
But it happened after the hit. Like, it wasn't actually, I mean, I'm not defending the hit. I'm just saying that the bloody part of the hit was actually in the aftermath, and obviously seeing all the blood on the ice on Darnell's visor just made the whole thing even feel worse. But, you know, the good news was, you know, I did see Nurse in the hallway after the game Saturday, even stopped and signed an autograph or 2 for some kids that were there. So, you know, the early indication was that, yes, well, he suffered a concussion, is that, you know, it looked awful. I mean, in the building, we don't see hits like this anymore too often in the game. You know, these kind of hits were a little more commonplace once upon a time. But, you know, in that shift, that, you know, Ryan Reaves' job is obviously trying to get energy for his team as a 4th liner. He's looking to finish the playoff. You know, I don't think he went in there with any intent to injure, but, you know, he mistimed the play, and it had some pretty, you know, difficult results to see.
Absolutely. In the wake of Nurse taking that horrible hit, we saw the Oilers announce yesterday they were going to call up Josh Brown from the Bakersfield Condors. Any more insight on what the Oilers might do with Darnell Nurse going through what he's going through? That obviously, just looking at that hit, just looking at how devastating it was, like, I'd obviously feel for him and just hope he recovers well. But yeah, looking to see what the Edmonton Oilers are going to do in light of that.
Well, it was one of these games, they just happened to be playing with 11 forwards and 7D because they've had Victor Arvidsson out of the lineup. So in that case, you know, they had 6D healthy that were still dressed after Nurse left the game early in the second period. So, you know, I think that they have some numbers there. You know, unfortunately, it's one of these players. I mean, and there's a few of them around the league out right now where the coach will be saying there's nothing we can really do to replace this person because, you know, Nurse, you know, kills penalties. He's not part of their power play. You know, obviously logs a lot of minutes, very, very tough, rugged player. And so, I think that they'll just try to weather it. They do have depth, but if it ends up being a long-term absence and we don't yet know, and with obviously the nature of head injuries, it's not a case where you can necessarily circle a date and say, that this bone is recovering and this will be fine on that time. But, given the kind of competitor Nurse is, you would expect he's probably not going to be out too long, but, at the same time, they'll be balancing the needs of being sure that he's in a good mental state, that everything is taken care of with that concussion before he's back in their lineup.
100%. Yeah. Just still can't believe the hit though. Not to double back on it, but just so violent and so just, you're right. We don't see those types of hits anymore. And just seeing it back in real time, obviously I wasn't at the game, just that just really violent, obviously. That's my 2 cents on the hit, but just, I still can't believe we saw it the way that it did.
What stood out to me, and I don't even know if the camera showed it because I didn't watch back the replay, is McDavid wasn't on the ice when the hit was thrown, but within seconds or a second, he came ripping off the Oilers bench and, in his role as captain, went over by the penalty boxes and looked pretty emotional and sort of the discussion he was having with the referees. Obviously, they were deliberating, I guess, to make sure they got the right call. I don't think there's any debate that they did get the right call on the ice in terms of, giving Ryan Reaves a match penalty, which, ejects him for the game, 5-minute power play for Edmonton for an illegal check to the head. But, like the urgency among the Oilers and how rattled they were, you just wonder. I mean, they had that 5-minute penalty. They only got 2 shots on it after that. It is one of those moments that kind of changes some momentum in the game. I think from the Leafs end of it, obviously they didn't like to see Nurse down either, but you kill a 5-minute penalty and you get your legs. It was a strange game. It was actually a very fun game, I thought, Saturday. Mm-hmm. The ice, I don't think was amazing. Like if you actually look back, a lot of the goals were kind of like the result of weird bounces or just seemed like, kind of a strange one, but, lots of back and forth. Obviously Edmonton ties it in the last minute. You get an overtime winner for Mitch Marner. So it was pretty entertaining night, but that was obviously the worst part of it. Just seeing that hit, and the Oilers were definitely upset, I think with good reason. I imagine, they'd just rather Nurse wasn't injured when they saw the 5-game, I should mention, because I was saying some people on the Leafs side probably thinks that's too much. I'm sure the Oilers were probably pretty pleased with that outcome.
Okay. We'll monitor that if anything changes. Let's go to Washington. Well, specifically Vegas, because the Washington Capitals were in Vegas last night. Alexander Ovechkin scored not once, not twice, but 3 times against the Vegas Golden Knights, and he's now 29 goals away from establishing a new record for goals scored in the NHL all time and leaving no doubt who the greatest goal scorer of all time is. Siege, when do you think Alexander Ovechkin's going to break this record now? Because he's on this torrid pace after, of course, people doubted him at the beginning of the season.
Mark me down for April 2nd in Carolina.
Oh, you picked a date. I love this.
Yeah,
love it. Why April 2nd?
I used a very highly scientific formula. I averaged Ovechkin's goals per game over the last 3 seasons. The answer at this point in time is 0.51 goals per game, even though he's obviously in this season scoring a little faster than that rate. And then I applied the fact he's 29 behind. That tells us it's going to take 58 games, give or take. 58 games from today for the Washington Capitals is April 2nd in Carolina. So I didn't go on vibes.
That is amazing. I just not expect you to pick an actual date.
Because you put it in the chat that you're like, when's he going to do it? I was like, well, I really obviously don't know. No one knows, but I can just apply some math here. And so that's the date. That would be a back end of a back-to-back for Washington. They play the day before in Boston. Would obviously require him to score at half a goal per game. And it would require Ovechkin to be healthy for all the games, which is something he's done a lot through his career. That's part of how you even get to a point where you're threatening a longevity record like he is. But pretty hard to ignore his start to the season. I was never on the train where he wasn't going to get there. Like I wasn't thinking that way, but I definitely thought some of the discussion, like the start of the year, there's so many players were like, yeah, he's doing it this year. What do you need? 42 from the start of the season. I was like, 42 goals, a big season at age 39. But with this start, he's definitely put himself in range where I think whether it ends up being in March, if he stays hot enough, or, he can go all the way to the last game of the regular season is April 17th at Pittsburgh, which would be kind of interesting just with always the Crosby Ovechkin vibes. I mean, he's given himself runway here where even if he goes a little below the pace I just mentioned, he's still got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's got 8 games after that. So he doesn't have to. I mean, it's still hard to score half a goal a game. That's a special mark for most players would call that an amazing season. But I'm not going to bet against the guy. And I think it really does help that the Capitals are off to such a good start this year, that it's not the entire, I mean, it's becoming our focus more and more, and that will continue. I mean, he's still a ways, 29 goals a ways off, but once he gets to like 10 goals off, I mean, it's going to be, every goal will be like a news story because this is such an unlikely record. I think if you go back many years, no one would have predicted it. Feels much more likely as we sit here today. And, you know, but I like that it's not the whole focus for the Capitals, that they are winning a lot of games. You know, I gave my stick tap last week to Strome as centerman. I mean, I think that a lot of good things are happening in Washington. And so that helps it. If it was a dreadful season, they were at the bottom of the standings and it's just like, can they feed Ovechkin for meaningless goals? I think it actually strangely be harder to get there. I think this is the perfect rhythm for this kind of chase to culminate this season.
The Capitals are proving you right, Siege. You've been on their bandwagon since before the season started. You've been all in on how they've gone about changing their team, and you felt they've been a playoff team. It looks like they're proving you right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's good that I can balance all my bad takes out with one that works out every once in a while. But, you know, I did like the offseason. Like, I thought that it was kind of they found creative solutions to what I'd call their problems. You know, one of those problems, and I'm putting it in air quotes, is that, you know, they had a lot of money committed to Darcy Kemper. Last year, he was supplanted by Charlie Lindgren to be their top goaltender. They found a way to turn him into Pierre-Luc Dubois. And like, I know what Dubois comes with, but I also know that that's a centerman who's still at a prime age in his career. You're getting him, I'm not going to say for nothing, but you're getting him for a player you feel the need to trade away from a cap perspective. You know, they get Chychrun in that deal. Like, I think that they creatively, and from not a position of strength per se, because it's not like they traded away a whole bunch of draft picks to bring in all these players. Like, I thought that they improved their team. And I have to say too, part of my thinking there, you know, before the season is I think Spencer Carberry is a really good coach. And, you know, you're probably going to hear more and more of that talk now because, you know, that's once those accolades or those flowers start getting handed around, the longer this kind of run goes. But, you know, he just really impressed me last season with the way he approached things, even in the playoffs where they just got the doors blown off by the Rangers. I just thought that he really has a very, it's like a modern coaching vibe. I mean, he's just very honest to the point, but you know, feels like he can motivate in ways that aren't just a kick in the butt or taking away some ice time and sending messages that way. So, you know, all that being said, I think that they, you know, for a team, they were trying to do what Pittsburgh's trying to do, right? And I realize we go back to Pittsburgh every podcast, but just because it's sort of the most interesting soap opera going right now, maybe. But, you know, I thought that they found the solution to at least put some pieces in place to have a competitive team while Ovechkin's got, you know, this year plus left on his career at least. Whereas, you know, the Penguins are flailing a little bit with, you know, with their off season, and, you know, they're already kind of at the bottom of the league, and you know, they got people like us asking, like, well, how are they going to get through 5 more months of this with some great players, but not a great team? Washington probably isn't a great team, but they've got a pretty good team, and they've got a really good coach, in my opinion. And those two things have combined to help them get right off to a great start. And you got to clap Ovechkin too, because he's put a lot of pucks in the net.
100%. This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Shopify. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe, Allbirds, or Skims, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business making selling, and for shoppers buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's home of the #1 checkout on the planet and the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going ka-ching. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout as Aloe or Allbirds or Skims, and sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/Johnston, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Johnston to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Johnston. Did you watch any of the Penguins this weekend? I actually watched them on Friday night when they lost that tough game against Columbus, but they did rebound to beat the San Jose Sharks
after blowing a 3-0 lead to San Jose too. I mean, look, I have to say I'm not one to try to chip away at wins. I mean, a win's a win, but it still just feels the vibes aren't great there. I'll put it that way. I mean, like you're at the point. Crosby's now at 599 goals. So he's one off 600, which is a pretty special number historically. I mean, 500 is a special number. When you get to 600, that's why we're chiseling Mount Rushmore busts of Sid out there. But, this is what the season kind of has been reduced to, I feel, is these sort of milestone moments. I mean, chances, like probably one of the best moments of the Penguins season, as weird as it sounds, is when Marc-Andre Fleury came back to the building and, they had that chance to celebrate him his last game in Pittsburgh as a member of the Minnesota Wild. Fleury won that night. It's a weird time. Like they're kind of in a ceremonial mode. I mean, Malkin's had a really nice start to the year again for a player's age. Crosby's just doing his thing. Looks like he's certainly in position to have yet another point per game season. But we're kind of, a lot of the celebrations are about the past, not the future. And, I think that's what's going to change. I think in the front office, obviously they're thinking more towards the future, even while planning all these celebrations. And so, they're just kind of caught between two eras, whereas at least like Washington legit looks like a playoff team. Like the two things can be happening side by side and one doesn't necessarily take away from the other. That being, the all-time goals chase and, the Capitals doing what they can to have the best season possible this year. But in Pittsburgh, it feels a little misaligned. The incentives for everybody don't line up right now. And I think that creates, from the outside anyway, just this feeling of like, oh, it's a little bit awkward.
One more thing before I move on here. How do you feel about the nickname Professor Johnston? I'm still amazed at your scientific formula on how you deduced when Alexander Ovechkin.
It wasn't that scientific, but
just go with it, CJ. Go with it.
I'll take the professor. I think what you're really saying is you're just shocked I did any amount of preparation for the pod. Like that I even that I even took 1 minute to do that, to come up with that formula was what you're most surprised at. I
was very amazed. I was like, oh shit, he actually came up with a date.
Well, I mean, I
didn't expect you to do that either. I figured you're gonna be like, oh, maybe like March or whatever. But the fact that you it's one thing to prep. You went above and beyond. Like that's amazing.
As I thought about it, though, I like having my line in the sand. Like I like that this far out we have audio where I could look like Nostradamus CJ here if if we get to early April and Ovechkin goes into that game, like we can just roll this clip.
Oh, we will. We will roll this clip, and if we get this right, I think
we should just tape a segment.
To roll it that too.
We should tape a segment for like 15 of these games, and then we can roll it.
That'd be so good.
Actually, Julian, March 27th in Minnesota will be the night.
How many other times do the Capitals and Leafs play against each other before the end of the year? I'm sure, just like everyone else around the league, people selfishly would love it if Ovechkin scores that goal against the team they cover. So that way that we all know what the story is going to be that night.
Right. It was sort of like I was rooting for the McDavid 1000th point in Toronto before, obviously got it the game before, right. Which, as expected, we didn't actually put a topper on that because we didn't do a show since then, but I'll say this: my takeaway from the McDavid 1000th point was how he was more emotional / excited than I expected to see. Just because he is, let's face it, he's sort of our hockey stoic in some ways. Notwithstanding when the cameras go behind the scenes and we get to see him in some of the fieriest moments with his teammates. But that looked like I think he was genuinely touched by the outpouring. Maybe not. I don't think it's the number, but I think it's maybe the outpouring of the way his teammates were. Maybe some of the things he heard or saw from people he cares about. I mean, it actually was pretty cool when he got to 1,000, and then he gets a point 1,001 on Thursday against Nashville, setting up Darnell Nurse on an overtime winner. So shout out to McDavid. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Like someone had a stat, it was Mark Masters. John Tavares had a fantastic career. Obviously, he's fellow number 1 overall pick, fellow player who played in the OHL at age 15 with a special exemption like McDavid. He hit 1,000 points last year. It was something like 320 more games. I think it was even more than that. Anyway, like something like 350 more games that McDavid has played. Like it just puts into perspective. And I'm not using this to I'm not knocking on Tavares. Like, he got to 1,000 points. Like, that's an awesome milestone, but like, this is a cut above. I mean, Kucherov, for example, he just hit 900 points. Like, he's still 100 away, and he got to the league before McDavid, and obviously he's had some monster seasons, won scoring titles and the like. I don't know. I hope we have the right. I don't know if we have the right words to frame it, but it's just like, we could live a long hockey life and not see someone score 1,000 points quicker.
I think you had it right when we talked about it on our last episode. And I think the way that we talked about McDavid, we just went in with the assumption that he was just going to break it. And we just kind of gave him his flowers just before we knew it was going to happen, because we knew it was going to happen.
In the first period, it happened. As I said, like, you just knew it.
Exactly. But one thing I remember you saying from the last episode is that McDavid could still have his best statistical season after hitting the 1,000 point mark. Like, that's how special of a player he is. Like, there's a lot of guys who, once they reach that 1,000, once they reach that mark, it might mean that, like, they're in their prime, but they're closer to exiting their prime than it is for them beforehand. Like, Connor McDavid still has, as far as we know, ways to go in his NHL career. There's still so much he has to accomplish before we can really, I mean, I don't know if you have him on your Mount Rushmore. Some people already think he's the greatest player we've ever seen, but
he's
the resume
in the
has to stack up. Yeah, he's absolutely in the conversation, but like we know there's more. We know he's thinking it. There's more he needs to add to his trophy case, but we haven't seen the best of Connor McDavid yet.
He doesn't care about any of this stuff. Like, sorry, like, and I'm not trying to invalidate my previous point. I think he cares about, like, the love and the support he's getting from teammates and family 100%. And friends. I saw a picture of him in the post game in the dressing room with his dad, and like, you could just see, like, the pride on his face. Like, it was a big moment for him. But like, he doesn't care about whether he wins another Hart Trophy or scoring title. Like, I
agree with that.
Confident of that. Like, he was only chasing one trophy and then one gold medal when he gets the Olympic time and stuff like that. Actually, when he was in Toronto on Saturday, I had a chance to ask him a little about the Four Nations. He made it clear, like, well, we might, from the outside, some people may call it, a bit of an exhibition, contrived tournament, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's a fair, I should say, like, I don't think it's unfair to say that. It's the first time we've seen this. But someone like McDavid, who's just been itching to play in this, and on that kind of stage, in that environment with, the absolute best of his peers, like, he'll be pretty excited, if nothing else. I can't say that everybody's give a crap meter across all Four Nations will be at the same level as his, but it's pretty clear he's going to be near the top just because he's waited so long for it and was pretty outspoken by his standards to get best on best hockey back. I'm all over the place here, but I do think he's got a shot. Okay. I think he's got a shot at 2,000 points. I don't think that I wouldn't say that lightly. He would be only the second player ever. Even the great Jaromir Jagr didn't quite get to 2,000. Of course, he went back to Russia for 3 years in the middle of his career as, like, still a good NHL player, and had lockouts and all these things get in the way. But I think McDavid, with good health, with a long career here, there's no reason to think he can't get to 2,000. I mean, he's going to be in the top 50 all time, maybe by the end of the season. Like that. I mean, he could get another 70 points this year anyway.
Like, I'm telling you, we have not seen the best. I'm telling you, we have not seen the best of Connor McDavid yet, and that's what makes his career so exciting.
There you go. Well, yeah, you're right. We're at that moment now. Like, there's no question that he's an all-time. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's like a little awkward at the start of a career with a player. Like, how good is he really? And all that. Like, no, we're at the point where there's no debate about that. Now it's really about how great can he become and what can he do. And this is such a big couple of years. Like, it reminds me how Crosby won the cup in 2009 with Pittsburgh. And there was like a lot of years in the middle there. Obviously won the Olympic gold in 2010 in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. But there's like a lot of years in the middle where the Penguins weren't doing much. But then in that one like calendar year, he had 2 cups, 2 Conn Smythes. Did he win the World Cup MVP? I think he might have. If he didn't, and he won the World Cup with Canada. Like in like basically a year and a half, he added like a number of huge significant trophies, and just sort of like took his reputation or his standing, which was already going to be very high, to like another level. I feel like, I don't know where Edmonton's at yet. Like, I don't know if we're still calling them, like, to me, they're still a team that could become a cup contender. I mean, there's some unknowns there. I expect them to make trades during the year. Let's see where they're at when they're their best. But he's got this chance now with this team to like win a cup. who knows, add another Conn Smythe to the one he won last year to win an Olympics potentially. Like this is like a big couple years in his career because he's clearly at his height.
Pretenders and contenders. I think U.S. Thanksgiving is this week. So
no,
is it this week or next week?
Next week, man.
It's next week. Oh shit. Okay,
it's the end of November.
I don't have my calendar in front of me. Yeah, my bad. Sorry.
Everything on my radar is by the Cowboys, and the Cowboys play a Monday night game tonight. And
yes, they do.
It would be a quick turnaround to a Thursday game because they always play on U.S. Thanksgiving.
Absolutely, they do. Yes, my bad. Sorry. You could tell I'm very excited about that segment because I've teased it on a couple of episodes leading up to it. Sorry, my bad.
I love U.S. Thanksgiving. Shout out to our American listeners.
Yeah.
I just love having a Cowboys game in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week. And the world gets quiet. I mean, it's a hard day. We do insider trading on TSN that day. It's a hard day to like get much going because it's one of the days where the NHL falls a little bit quiet in the midseason. Like there's just, because a lot of teams are based in the States. A lot of people are taking some time to be with family and eat turkey and watch the Cowboys lose.
At least, both of our teams have been really shit this year. So I feel like we've been very numb to our teams this year in particular. Yeah,
I was at that event for Scott Burnside last weekend when the Eagles-Cowboys game was on, which normally like a loss to the Eagles, a bad loss as it was, like a one-sided loss, would probably like ruin my night. Like I didn't because I didn't go there thinking I was going to see anything good. So like it was all like I'm in the spot where like if they do anything, it's like when you have a little kid or something, you're like, oh, it's cute that they did anything. That's how I'm viewing the Cowboys now. It's like if they do anything positive, I'm like, oh wow, that's kind of neat. But there's no expectations at this point. They've stomped them out of me.
I'm gonna stop us both from spiraling down about how bad our NFL teams are and segue over into some CBA talk. We're gonna use your brain again to talk about
words
CBA.
Never spoken.
Yeah, never, absolutely never. Professor, we need you to talk about this topic that Elliot Friedman called attention to over the weekend on Saturday headlines on Hockey Night in Canada. The next year's salary cap could be pushed well over the 5% growth limit, could be as much as 95 or 97 million. It should be setting to go up to about 92.4 million according to the CPA, but with the revenues going up so high, maybe it goes up higher. What do you see from this situation? There's a whole conversation to be had about the upcoming CBA.
Sure. And let's just, frame it in the plainest terms possible. The last CBA extension was done during the pandemic days, when obviously it wasn't known what the world was going to look like. And so there's, they changed the formula for how the salary cap was decided. It was done obviously to protect both owners and players in the event that, no one knew how long we'd be without games. And the league, like the NHL, is so gate driven, that it was tough to know what they were dealing with. And so, as we come to the end of that extension, fortunately, revenues have rebounded in a way I think even higher than the league might have hoped, back in 2020. And essentially that what's called for in that CBA is for the cap to go up 5% a year. And Gary Bettman actually already said in September at the Board of Governors meeting that they were projecting next year's cap to be 92.5 million, which is just a hair above 5% from the current cap. And then we have one more season on the CBA beyond that, which if you applied 5% more would take you to roughly 97 million in 2 years' time. But here's where we're at. With the CBA talks set to begin, there's an opportunity here for the players and the owners to negotiate what the cap goes to. And what Elliot highlighted in his report on Saturday is there's at least some discussion on the players' end is, would we be up for this? And this is why it's sort of controversial, or this is why it's not one size fits all. If you were to become a free agent this summer, it's fair to say you would want the cap to go up as much as possible, just because you want as much money to be in the system at that summer as possible. It just means more teams have more money to spend. Like in simple terms, it increases the likelihood you get paid a little bit more money, or you get a contract that calls for to be paid more money if the cap goes up. But then there could be other players in other situations who are like, wait a minute, I want the cap to go up a lot in 2 years' time, or I signed my deal thinking this. And so it actually is a very difficult conversation, or it's a difficult thing to find consensus from the Players Association side, is because they represent, of course, a membership that has all kinds of different needs and wants, and they're at different stages of their careers and different stages of their contracts. And so let's see where it goes. But the thinking is generally, and I believe the NBA did this at some point, Julian, when they signed a big new TV contract. Instead of having 1 year where there's a massive jump because of that, in the NBA's case, that massive TV contract, they negotiate kind of a smoothing up, we'll call it, so that it takes smoother jumps. And so, what Elliot was talking about is the notion that maybe it makes more sense starting this coming summer to have the cap take more than a 5% jump, with the idea that the next summer is going to be more than a 5% jump until sort of water finds its level, because the revenues have been going well. And so I don't know where this goes yet. It's a little preliminary to make predictions, but it is certainly interesting that this talk's being had. I mean, it's similar to what I've talked about, how the GMs have said they want maybe 5-year term limits on contracts. That's something that would ultimately have to be negotiated, just as this would have to be negotiated. And it's all part of a larger negotiation. But the fact that, whether it's the GMs having their talks about what they want to see, obviously the players debating or discussing the merits of this bigger salary cap bump, I mean, you get the sense everyone's really bracing for those CBA discussions to get going. This is such a different environment than whenever before, because it's not up till September 2026. The expectation is talks will begin on the CBA between the league and the players in January 2025. So again, my back of the napkin math, that's 20 months early. The discussions from the, expiration of the CBA are going to get going. And I don't actually expect a new CBA to be written as part of this discussion. I think that they're just going to amend some areas they don't like, which is obviously easier to do than reconstructing a 500-page legal document. But also, it's because there's a feeling that they don't have to reinvent the wheel, I believe. I think that there's a sense from both sides of the table that, okay, well, you might do this and I might do that, and we might do this with the cap, but that it can all be just a back and forth. And it's welcome relief for someone who lived through the 2012-13 lockout professionally, like literally stood on the sidewalk in New York for 6 straight months, waiting for people to come out of meetings and give us 2-word answers, and then having to go write a story on it, because it all points to harmony in the sport. And let's see where they end up. I think that there's also an understanding that the system maybe has been too constrictive. Again, for part of it's really pandemic related. It's not because it was broken system. It's because there wasn't enough money flowing in the doors for a couple of years there, and that changed what the cap did. But I mean, if we get these big cap jumps, I mean, it's going to obviously line players' pockets, but it's also going to open up the possibility for more player movement. I think just naturally teams will have more cap space. They can make bigger trades, or maybe more players want to go to free agency because there's more money to be spent in the system, those types of things. So I think it's all positive news. And I do think we're going to talk about this more as we get into the new year, because it feels like they want to get it done early too. That's another thing.
Crossing my fingers for that harmony, because not down for another work stoppage.
But you could remember I made the point about McDavid and Kaprizov having contract extensions this summer.
Thought about that throughout your entire answer.
But it's like, this also goes back to that point that I made a couple shows ago, is if you're a free agent and this sort of talk is happening, but nothing's decided, like, again, I don't think there's any reason to sign your next deal. Again, if you're one of these high leverage, look, some players are in different spots. You want to get a contract, you're just happy to get that security locked in. But if you're one of the players that really has leverage, and obviously McDavid has as much as you possibly could have, but Kaprizov isn't too far off. I mean, I think you want to wait until the dust settles on this, just so you're making you have a clearer picture of what you're deciding to do.
For sure. It would be fun. It would be fun if, like, some player, whether it's McDavid, just like they extend by like 1 year, and they say, like, just give me 1 year, like $13 million. And then you're able to cash it on a much more lucrative deal with the cap going up. I would love to see a player just do that. Just be like, all right, just give me the one, and make it very obvious that you're waiting for the cap to go up significantly, so you can take advantage of that. I would love to see that. I remember I saw people sort of speculating that Draisaitl should have done that at the time. I don't think that ever really was on the table. He wanted to be in Edmonton. Obviously, he signed an 8-year extension. He's the highest paid player in the league starting next season.
I don't think he has any regrets, but there was always that notion that wouldn't it make sense for Draisaitl to basically guarantee he has 2 more years in Edmonton? By then he'll know what McDavid has done. He'll have seen what the team did. He'll have leverage again. Yeah, who knows? Maybe it'll happen. I mean, in a new cap environment where the rules of the system change, the habits change, right? We've never seen so many 8-year contracts in our life until they made 8 years the maximum. And then that became the magnet for every player wanted 8-year deals that had the leverage to get them. When the system changes, everything will adjust and players will make different decisions that they think make the most sense under the new rules. And so that's actually part of the cool part. I realize some people's ears might be bleeding for us talking about a CBA and all this stuff at this stage. But like one of the neat parts of when the CBA changes is, what teams do, what players do changes too. And I like sort of spotting those trends and I like sort of the thought exercise of, how do you manage a career the best you can under the rules?
One more CBA question for you. You mentioned 8-year contracts. Do you envision that the next CBA will still allow for that? Do you see contract lengths being affected in any way?
I mean, the players probably won't give that up easily. It would be the best way to say it. I think that they'd have to get a pretty significant, some sort of carrot in return to reduce the length of those deals. And so it's hard to say if it will happen or won't happen, but that, if the league wants to reduce it to 5 years, I mean, that would be a pretty big give, I would say, from the player side of things. Now there's lots of things the players might get in exchange for it. So who knows? Maybe there's like luxury, like franchise tags or something similar to that, the way that works in the NFL, or, one player that doesn't really count against your cap that each team can average something. Like, who knows? There might be something big enough that it makes sense for the players to do that. But they haven't actually engaged in negotiation. So there's a little bit of a guessing game involved in like no one wants to show their cards before they get to the table. Right. So I don't know what items the players like with certainty would be willing to give up or what they absolutely are keeping. Same on the owner side. I mean, I think it's fair to guess on the owner side that there is no world in which they're giving up the hard salary cap because that's worked very well for owners. It's worked tremendously well for franchise values, for people that own the teams. I would say that's a safe bet that the owners aren't going to the table looking to give that up under any circumstances, under any ask. But, we'll see where things end up. I mean, the dust isn't going to settle on this overnight. We'll have some time to pick through it as we get into the new year.
For sure. For the record, I'm rooting for a designated player spot. I'm rooting for that spot where a player's contract doesn't have to go on the salary cap books. Like, or maybe the fact that the MLS has that is incredible. Yeah,
or maybe it's not fully off the books, but it's only partially on the books. So it's a way to maybe pay a McDavid $20 million a year, but not have him actually count $20 million against the cap in some way. Maybe he only counts $10 million. So it's still like a big cap charge, but it's a way maybe for the best players in the league to make more money. I don't know exactly what they'll land on, but there's lots of ways to get creative.
100%. I want to focus on one more team before we get to ask CJ if that's cool with you. The Colorado Avalanche, Val Nichushkin back in the Avs lineup, returning after his time in Stage 3 of the NHLPA Player Assistance Program. What do you think of that situation? How much more healthy are they getting?
Well, I mean, he might have been their best player last year. Certainly he was in the conversation, and unfortunately for Val, I mean, even when he exited the playoffs, he was basically scoring a goal a game for them into round 2 of the playoffs. And so from a hockey's perspective, this is massive. I mean, Colorado's first 6 weeks of the season have been all about just trying to weather all the injury situations they have to get to a point where they can see what their team looks like, in today's eyes with all their players back. And so this is a huge piece back in their lineup. Nichushkin spoke to reporters in Denver and sounded very optimistic about, how he reacted to the treatment, where he's at personally, mentally, the way he's felt welcome back by his teammates and by the organization. And so, the other question kind of lingering out there is, you might have noticed Gabriel Landeskog is not just skating now in Denver. He was, doing some drills with the Avalanche and obviously he's made no secret of his desire to get back this season, had a surgery that's, unfortunately has kept him out a long, long, long time. Who knows what, I don't know if he knows. I don't know if they know what it will be like. I do know that if he gets back and suffers the same injury, it's basically like back to square one. Like this, unfortunately, it's almost like an all or nothing kind of recovery. in the sense that it's not like he would have a setback. Probably if he had the same injury again, if he came back, would be the certain end of his NHL career. So the stakes are pretty high for him. And, the Avs would have to clear about $4 million off the books right now to activate Landeskog. But, seeing Nichushkin back, see some other players back in their lineup, it's just hard not to think there might still be one more return coming here in some point in the not too distant future.
Okay. And with that, do you know what it's time for now on our Monday edition of the CJ show? CJ?
Ask CJ.
There we go. Love it. That's when we take in questions from listeners like you of our podcast, whether on Twitter, whether on Discord. I did a call out on Blue Sky over the weekend, and the only thing I got from people was, "Hey, when is CJ going to Blue Sky?" I'll just get to the questions.
Well, and I'll just say this: I don't need one more social media app.
I know you don't. Let's start with this one from Jay Money, friend of the show, Jay Money. Thoughts on the bonkers Tim Stützle penalty Saturday night against Andrei Svechnikov in Carolina? Any fallout expected? I don't expect any fallout. Did you? I don't know if you saw.
I didn't even see it. So this is one of these ones. I am totally ill prepared for this one.
I'll just give you the breakdown because I saw it for myself, and you tell me what you think. So the Senators, they're getting a scoring chance. Tim Stützle is looking to wind up after taking a pass, and as he winds up, his stick knocks Andrei Svechnikov's sticks out of his hands before Stützle puts the puck in the net. So the referees called interference on it, thinking that Stützle may have purposely taken Andrei Svechnikov's stick out of his hands, but it's clearly something that happened just in motion with him winding up to shoot. I didn't think it deserved to be a penalty call, but the referees did. A lot of people were very upset about how the officiating went in that Senators Carolina Hurricanes game on Saturday. There were a few calls that were a little to say the least.
I mean, how many games have you watched? I can't think of seeing that. I mean, you've seen obviously
never seen that before in my life.
You've seen a follow through of a shot, high stick someone, for example, by accident. But that is a penalty. You got to control your stick. In this case, that's a weird one. I don't think anything's going to change, but I should ask someone to see what the deal is there.
Because it's very when you get a chance, you can go look for it yourself, but it was very accidental. By the letter of the law, I can understand it being interference, but I didn't think Stützle purposely knocked Svechnikov's stick out of his hand. Anyway, I was just curious about your thoughts on that. And
well, thanks for bringing it to my attention. I'll see if I can get a clearer answer, a little more update on that.
All right, cool. Next one from Adam Kerr of the Detroit Red Wings, looking to move on from head coach Derek Lalonde. I mean,
I hate to quibble with the question. Are they looking to? I mean, they just could if they wanted to. I'm sure it's a debate to some degree. Look, a lot of coaches get fired in this league. He's on an expiring contract. The start to the season hasn't gone great. The seat is warmest in Detroit and in Boston, where Jim Montgomery and the Bruins have not had the start to their season. But I don't think they're looking to. If anything, they're not looking to. But they might get to a point where they're forced to, where they feel that the team isn't moving forward. That the best thing to do is to put the trust in someone else. But I don't think in any way are they looking to do it. I think all things being equal, they'd love not to have to do it. But we'll have to see how that plays out. I mean, we're actually kind of late in the year to not have had a head coach firing. Not that I'm calling for a rash of firings, but just if you look historically, the heat gets turned up early in this league. I mean, it's tough. The reasons are obvious. It's tough to come back from a bad start, and it's the easiest change to make, generally speaking, in most organizations. So, no, I think the Red Wings would love to keep Derek Lalonde, but we'll see if they get to a point where they feel they have to make that kind of change to spark a response from the group.
Next one from Colton Arthurs. Do you have a rotation for your runners, or do you just run a pair into the ground and replace them? How often do you replace your runners, your running shoes?
I sort of have a rotation. Like right now I have two pairs that are completely different brands. that I run in. I just go on sort of general wear and tear, how they feel. I probably opt to replace them sooner than I have to, just because I don't want to get repetitive use injuries from running every single day. You know, I'm cognizant of the fact that when having a run streak, the one thing that can end a run streak is the inability to run if you get injured. So I like to rotate them. This will sound weird. Sometimes it's just mental. Like I might like having a different shoe the one day might be like, oh, I'm excited to wear that shoe today. I don't know why, because I don't think it effectively changes all that much. There's so many good products out there. But yeah, I do rotate them. I don't have a set like kilometer limit or mile limit where I'm like, okay, now I have to replace them. I just go on feel. And in fact, right now, one of my pairs probably needs replaced. So I should get down to my local shoe shop and buy a pair.
What's the brand you're wearing right now?
I have one Nike one that I got on the go, and then I'm trying to think of the other one, Saucony. And then, but in the wintertime, and we're almost getting to winter running here, there's a Nike Gore-Tex mock-up shoe. Like it's like a crossover thing. And it's amazing for winter running. They're almost, for anyone who's a hiker, they almost feel like hiking shoes. Like there's a lot more support to them. They're not like bouncy, like your typical running shoes, but obviously you need that when you're running in icy or snowy conditions. And they're just amazingly waterproof. Like I've run in like a foot of snow, and as long as if I sort it out properly before I get outside, my feet somehow don't get wet, which is obviously key, especially if you're going to be out for longer runs. So anyway, I actually signed up for a half marathon at the end of January.
Ooh.
And so what's interesting about that is it's going to keep me accountable, having to do long runs in through the socializing, next few weeks ahead, but also more just potentially could be crappy weather where I live here. I could be doing some, 16, 18, 20K runs in snow and wind and whatever comes. So I'm excited about it, not as a goal race, but just as something to keep me focused here through the winter.
CJ, a modern marvel, still being able to keep up his running streak and putting you on some game on the shoes to wear for those runs. One more for you. Rock Smasher, do you think the goaltending trio for Team Canada at Four Nations has been solidified?
No. They met last week, the members of Team Canada's management group. They focused on maybe paring down the list a little bit. I think they have an idea of what it's going to look like, but I don't think they've settled on the three. And all you have to do is go to NHL.com, goalies, sort by nationality, Canada, and then do save percentage. And my goodness, it's a bit of a wasteland. It's a bit of and it's not a comment on, there's not obvious choices. I mean, I guess there's a few obvious choices among the group that includes, Jordan Binnington, Aiden Hill, Darcy Kemper. Those are all goalies that have won a Stanley Cup behind really good teams and like they've played big games. So they're probably one or more from that group makes a team, but you have a lot of but or what if with the rest of what's there. So I don't think it's been decided yet. They have until December 2nd to make that choice. And I imagine they're going to use most of the time needed just to gauge where things are at.
All right. Well done. Another edition of the CJ Show in the books. We'll be back later this week with a brand new episode. We'll have stick taps. In the meantime, subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to our show. CJ, well done as always.
Thanks. Sorry for all the CBA talk, but you got to let me nerd out every once in a while.
No,
I like
brilliant.
a little CBA talk.
Personally, I thought the CBA talk was the best segment of today's show. I thought so.
I feel like
really interesting.
If we get I don't know how good the numbers we get are, but I feel like that might be where we get the most skip aheads.
Oh no, math.
This feels like school.
No, we don't need Professor Johnston boring us today, which he didn't do today.
April 2nd at Carolina.
Be there. Thanks, guys.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.